We have a very interesting guest planned for you today. His name is Dr. Michael Nehls. He is a physician and molecular degenerist. My goodness, we are talking about brains and brains being under attack. Today, mine appears to have been particularly assaulted. He's a molecular geneticist specializing in immunology. He's also a researcher. He has been published in collaboration with two Nobel Prize winners. He has received awards in molecular psychiatry from the Rostock University Hospital. He is author of The Indoctrinated Brain. Okay, this is what we're going to talk about today, about the attack on both the actual parenchyma, the tissue of the brain, and through toxic brainwashing. He suggests tactics to resist neurological warfare and the battle for your mind. He'll be here right after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Are you one of the millions of American women and men dealing with premature hair thinning and hair loss? Or maybe you're scared about inheriting that thinning look because it runs in your family? Start 2024 with a real solution that delivers results without the harsh side effects or unwanted chemicals and no need for prescription. Provia uses a safe natural ingredient, Procapil, to effectively target the three main causes of premature hair thinning and hair loss. By supporting healthy scalp circulation, the delivery of nourishing nutrients, and healthy hair follicle anchoring to your scalp, Provia guarantees more hair on your head than in the shower or on your comb. Right now, new customers save over 50% plus free shipping. Every introductory package includes a full 60-day supply of Provia serum for daily use, plus the Provia Super Concentrate for faster, more noticeable results. Don't wait. Order now to save an extra 10% and get free shipping at proviahair.com/Drew. That's PROVIAHAIR, proviahair.com/DREW. I think everyone knows the next medical crisis could be just around the corner, whether it comes in the form of another pandemic or something much more routine like a tick bite. You and your family need to be prepared. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. You know the Wellness Company. We have their physicians on like Dr. McCullough frequently. The Wellness Company and their doctors are medical professionals you can trust. And their new medical emergency kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy.
It's a safety net. It's an insurance policy
absolutely.
That you hope you're not going to need, but if you need it, you sure as heck are going to wish you had it if you need it.
Be ready for anything. This medical emergency kit contains an assortment of life-saving medications, including ivermectin, Z-Pak. The medical emergency kit provides a guidebook to aid in the safe use of all these life-saving medications. From anthrax to tick bites to COVID-19, the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit is exactly what you need to have on hand to be prepared. Rest assured, knowing that you have emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and antiparasitics on hand to help you and your family stay safe from whatever life throws at you next. Go to drdrew.com/TWC. That is drdrew.com/TWC to get 10% off today. Just click on that link. As I said, my guest is Dr. Michael Nehls. The book is The Indoctrinated Brain, How to Successfully Fend Off the Global Attack on Your Mind, on your mental freedom. It is out now. You can follow Dr. Nehls at Nehls, Nehls, MD on X, as well as Michael-Nehls, Nehls.com. And I've been rather preoccupied with this topic for a while. I have been thinking a lot about indoctrination and about brainwashing and propaganda. And it gets to the point where it's hard to know who to believe, right? There's a lot going on, and they're all vying for your attention and attempting to persuade you. And Dr. Nehls, in his book, makes the case there is something even more problematic going on. He calls neurological warfare. Please welcome Dr. Michael Nehls.
Hey, hello, Drew.
Welcome.
And thank you very much for the invitation. I feel honored. Thank you.
Yeah, it's our privilege. So, your background, you're a physician, you've done work in Alzheimer's disease, you're specialized in genetics and immunology or molecular genetics. What led you down this road? What was happening that got you to write this book?
Well, there are many things. First of all, I was working very hard in the last 15 years on Alzheimer's disease, as you already mentioned, particularly what is the cause of the disease. And I discovered that not what is usually said, that age is actually the major cause of Alzheimer's. It's quite contrary. Age is actually quite good for us because we become more wise when we age, unless, of course, our autobiographical memory center, which is called the hippocampus, is not working right. And I know from my research now that Alzheimer's can be prevented by 100%. So age is not the cause. Age is just something that is required because it takes a few decades, usually 4, 5, or 6, to develop the disease. And what I learned about Alzheimer's is that we can prevent it by keeping a lifestyle that is more natural, to more close to our natural needs. And we were far off the natural needs already before 2020. And I wrote a book about this before this one. It is called The Exhausted Brain, where I show that the mental energy that we need for thinking, for being curious, for having a strong psychological resilience, which all together with our memory center, which contains all the information that we have stored over our lifetime, that all this together is our mental immune system. And this was decaying already before 2020. And one of the consequences of this decay is a rise in depression rates and a rise in Alzheimer's rates. And the depression rates, according to the World Health Organization, were like highest ever recorded in summer 2019. And then the measures came in 2020, and they were going completely in the wrong direction. And I already explained in my previous book, we will see a huge rise in depression rates. We will see a huge rise in Alzheimer's rates. And that's actually what's happening. And that just made me curious because on the one side, we want to save people by these measures. On the other side, we throw them in a disaster. And this is just the tip of an iceberg. I mean, depression rates and Alzheimer's are just the tip of an iceberg of a society whose brains are not functioning very well. And that's maybe even the reason why all these strange measures in 2020 were accepted. But then we were even more off the course 2020, which led us to accept even more strange measures like the injection program of the mRNA. Totally experimental. No sane person would actually accept that. And from my research in immunology, and particularly also on Alzheimer's, I realized that Alzheimer's is essentially a disease which is caused by neuroinflammation. And it was already known from SARS-CoV-1, the virus which tried to make a pandemic in 2002 and 2003, and papers were published then 3 or 4 years later. They showed that the spike protein is quite able to cause inflammation of the brain, neuroinflammation, and that this neuroinflammation causes our autobiographical memory to shrink. And that, of course, is not a good thing. So the measures in 2020 advanced the shrinkage of our hippocampus, of our autobiographical memory center, and then it was even further advanced by the spike protein that was now not only delivered by the virus, but also by this mRNA program. And this together gave me the creeps. I was immediately aware that this can't be true unless there's something else going on. And if you look at the people who actually try to convince us that this is really important, that we actually follow the rules, that we accept everything that is done to us, these are the people who actually advance something which we call the Great Reset. And it was totally clear that the Great Reset aims at something that is so far away from what people would accept unless they are kind of extremely brainwashed. And now if you look at the hippocampus, our autobiographical memory center, if you really destroy its functionalities, and we go maybe more in depth on that, then you actually get into a situation where people accept essentially everything. And when you look at this program, this reset program is almost like a new operating system that is installed into the brains of people. And as you know from computers, if you install a new operating system, you have to first to destroy the previous one. You have to reformat the hard drive. And as I describe in my book, with the measures taken in 2020 and even more in 21, when this mRNA program was introduced, altogether essentially achieved exactly that. You erase essentially former memories and you replace them with the narratives that we are forced to memorize.
So, okay, a lot packed into that. Have you documented the hippocampus shrinking across adulthood? And I ask that question because I have seen documentation of a relatively significant, I don't want to say pandemic, incidents of shrinkage of hippocampus in young adults due to childhood trauma. In this country in particular, that is terribly common. Have you controlled for that in what you observed? First question. I have a million other questions too, but that's my first one.
Yeah, sure. Now, first of all, there are lots of studies out, large studies out, where we have data of the hippocampus size over the lifetime of people or on different different lifetimes. The largest study was from the Biobank in England, where approximately 20,000 English people, the hippocampus was measured on different lifetimes. And we know that the hippocampus shrinkage rate is about 1.5% starting in adulthood. Of course, the shrinkage is absolutely unnormal, because if they call it normal, but it's unnatural. And because we know if we change the lifestyle, we can measure an increase very quickly. So because the hippocampus has a unique feature to grow. What you are mentioning, of course, the shrinkage already in childhood, in early on, is what we call post-traumatic stress syndrome. And in the post-traumatic stress syndrome, actually the natural or the feature that we find in the hippocampus, in the brain, is specifically a shrinkage of the hippocampus. That's actually its unique feature. Yeah.
Right. We got a lot of that over here. And then you've mentioned lifestyle and inflammation. So I want to dig into that a little more. And then there's a corollary question to that, which I'll try to tag on at the end of this. So I'm guessing when you say inflammation, are you talking about microvascular inflammation and damage done that way? Or is there actually immune migration into some component of the neuronal or microglial system? So that's one question. What kind of inflammation are we talking about here? And I'm guessing, being overweight, American diet in particular, sedentary lifestyle, these are all risk factors for either of those, frankly, but particularly the microvascular would seem to me. And then I want to tag on the final, you answer those first, then I have a follow-on to whatever you say here.
Yeah, sure. So actually it's both, and it's very hard to differentiate between the two because inflammation is everywhere in a sense. If we eat wrong, if we eat, for example, too much carbohydrates, we get these advanced glycation end products. They stimulate the receptor for those, the receptor of advanced glycation end products, interestingly abbreviated as RAGE. It's really a RAGE of the immune system, pro-inflammatory. We have the inflammation in our vessels, which essentially cause arteriosclerosis, which is one form of dementia. It could come out of this, which I call vascular dementia. But then we have the other form of dementia, which is caused by destruction and non-function of the hippocampus. I call this one hippocampal dementia. It's the majority of cases, even though they're both so related and they actually support each other. So it's almost like a death cycle between them. So vascular dementia, of course, causes a blood flow to be diminished to the hippocampus, and that's not good. On the other side, the Alzheimer's toxin, which is produced when the hippocampus is shrinking, this one, of course, causes also inflammation in the vessels, which essentially activate the vascular dementia issue. So both are essentially there, but if you want to differentiate the two, then we have more cases of Alzheimer's than of vascular dementia. But and since both are actually have the same origin of based on a lifestyle that is unhealthy, it really doesn't matter at the end. But to your second question, the inflammation itself. When I talk about neuroinflammation, I mean the inflammation that is caused by the activation of cells in the brain, which we call microglia, and the microglia gets activated. Microglia, for example, has a receptor for which sees microorganisms that have invaded the brain. There's even a receptor for the spike, so TLR4 it's called, and TLR4 actually sees the spike protein, activates the microglia, which are the macrophages or the immune cells of the brain, and by this activation, clean up cells, but at the same time recognizers of an attack of the brain by microorganisms. And they see the spike protein, and of course, when they see the spike protein, they have essentially the readout, okay, we have a coronavirus infection of the brain. And consequently, they start a pro-inflammatory process. And the pro-inflammatory process leads to a production of pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and a couple of others. And we know that these cytokines inhibit the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus. And this production of new nerve cells is highly necessary that the hippocampus maintains its function. For example, we are curious. For example, that we have a high level of resilience. And I have even shown that this production of new nerve cells is required that we can actually remember our own thoughts. They are the mental energy required for deep thinking, for alternative thinking, for thinking at all. So if you cut down the production of these nerve cells by creating neuroinflammation, then you not only have brain fog, which is one of the outcomes, which are now known as long COVID, post-COVID, or post-vac, which are all called spikopathy. But a spikopathy essentially is an activation of the microglia with the result that the hippocampus is harmed. And then we harm not only our memory center or the ability to memorize things, what we also essentially harm is our ability to think, our ability to be curious. We reduce our psychological resilience. And we see the result. We see in 21, for example, there was an analysis from the German Alzheimer's Society, and they compared the numbers from 2018 to 2021, the cases of new cases of Alzheimer's in Germany. And we had a rise by 31%. And this rise was not only, of course, that we have more cases in the age group 65 plus, which is natural, or not natural, but the normal time it takes for Alzheimer's to develop, because these measures and the spike protein are so harmful and causing the neuroinflammation, we have also an acceleration of the disease process. So the first time we had of these almost 430,000 new cases in 21 in Germany, 100,000 of those were below the age of 65, clearly showing that not age is the cause, but what was done to the population.
Okay, so my follow-on question, we're going to talk after this question about prevention, but my follow-on question is in terms of the reset. The people that are commonly associated with this reset do not look to me like people who are avoiding the hippocampal shrinkage for a variety of reasons. They're overweight, they're sedentary, they're not the picture of fitness. They're advocating for the vaccine. They've allegedly taken the boosters. They've had COVID. Who's going to do the reset if everybody has the shrunken hippocampus?
Well, it's hard to tell who is actually behind everything that we are experiencing right now, and I'm not in the position actually to point out who really has the key in his hands, and really is essentially orchestrating what's going on worldwide, and that is orchestrated. It's obvious, never in the history of our planet were all all countries kind of unified in their approach and without any questions asked. So, and we also know that the virus has been created, and we know that the mRNA has been introduced as a way to kind of vaccinate people. And even if it's totally clear that it doesn't work, it's continued with a great impact. So there is somebody behind it, but who it is, we don't know. We know who is actually advocating it, but if these are the real people or just the front people, we don't know.
So in terms of prevention, I just wrote down I just jotted down things that I normally associate with a reduction of dementias and improved vascular health. Socialization. My people that work with dementias always say that's probably numero uno. That's, of course, the opposite of what we did during lockdowns. Sleep, important. Reduce carbohydrates, lose weight, exercise, avoid, these processed, God knows what is in our food. Am I getting at the basics here?
Absolutely. In my former books, I had a formula, which is the formula against Alzheimer's disease. And in the same formula now is in the new book, and it applies to Alzheimer's, but essentially it's a formula against indoctrination. Because what this formula shows is what you need to do in what areas of your life you need to change something. Maybe not. It's individual. Some people already exercise, so it doesn't apply. Some people sleep already well. Some people have already a purpose in life. Some don't. So find one. Check out what you're eating. Of course, it's not only the bad stuff we are eating. The huge problem is also the deficiencies in micronutrients, for example. Even if people tell me they eat well, like a Mediterranean diet or an island diet, let's say an Asian diet, which is sometimes very healthy. But even if they do all that, certain things are missing. So in the Northern Hemisphere, like in Germany and probably also northern parts of America, United States, you certainly have a lack of vitamin D. And we know that, for example, vitamin D is not only important for your mental health. So, for example, with a vitamin D level of about 125 nanomole, and per liter, this is the number you find in tribes in Africa that live outside. It's a natural level of vitamin D. And the level we measure in Germany, for example, in winter is around 25. This is a difference of 100 nanomole. And there are studies out which show you have a 7% decrease of the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's by just raising the vitamin D level by 10 nanomole. So if you go from 25 to 125, which would be natural, then we get a 70% decrease in the likelihood of Alzheimer's. And funnily, or interestingly, the same level, 125 nanomole, it's published, peer-reviewed in several papers. The likelihood of dying of COVID is essentially zero. Because it's not only our mental immune system requiring this micronutrient, also our physical immune system fighting microorganisms require it. And the cytokine storm that we essentially we know is actually the real cause of severe COVID can be completely inhibited if you balance the regulation of your genes in your immune cells, and vitamin D as a regulator of genes in the immune cells, and as well as in the nerve cells, if that is present at the level of 125 nanomole, then the cytokine storm is prevented.
So the next great assault, as you've alluded to several times, is the spike protein itself, which causes, you called it a spikeopathy, I think was the word you used, which I love. I call it a spike-induced endotheliitis. That's how I think of it. It's all the same. We're all saying the same thing. It's not surprising to me that the spike was the target of a rapidly created vaccine that had to be rolled out instantly when people thought that was going to save many, many lives. It makes sense at that point. What doesn't make sense, I understand that. What doesn't make sense is that there are other literally better whole virus vaccines out there, like Covaxin, and the continued push to use this spike-generating vaccine against Omicron, which is a nothing for the vast majority of the population. Other than sinister forces, what are they telling? What is the justification for that?
There's no justification at all for me, from my point of view. First of all, the spike protein, we know the spike protein is very harmful. We already knew from SARS-CoV-1 that it actually harms.
But Michael, what I said there, because you said not necessarily when I said, they had to roll something out fast and the spike protein was an obvious target, and you said no, not necessarily.
Yeah, no.
And by the way, there's some evidence that I'm going to say, as I've looked into this a lot these days, and there was some evidence they already had this underway where they were creating a coronavirus spike protein mRNA vaccine, and they just continued that work as opposed to going to the nucleocapsid or the whole virus or these other things they could have done. Exactly. And then once they were there, they wouldn't let go of it, which is the oddest thing in the world to me. But you keep going. I'm sorry.
It's totally odd. First of all, why use the mRNA? Because to vaccinate somebody, the immune system quickly realizes there's something strange in the body which shouldn't be there, and it starts to attack it and evolves around it and is able to prevent further disease if a second infection comes along with the same virus or whatever it is. So you don't need mRNA, you just need the protein. First of all, and there was a suggestion even here in Germany, somebody produced enough protein. He said, in a week, we can produce enough protein to essentially vaccinate everybody in Germany. And he was actually attacked very heavily. So nobody wanted that. Then we know that the nucleocapsid gives a much better target, essentially, for immunization. We know this already from infected people, that if they have a high titer of nucleocapsid antibodies, they are much more secure for a second or infection. Third, the mRNA had to be packed, and it had to be packed by these lipid nanoparticles, which are inflammatory by themselves, but even worse, they were generated to cross the blood-brain barrier, actually to introduce chemicals against cancer, for example, into the brain. So now we have a stabilized mRNA that in a vehicle that actually packaged in a way that it can actually enter the brain. And I can tell you the spike protein has nothing to do in the brain. It's really dangerous. Then in addition to that, the spike protein itself was modified. There was a think tank that published already, it was essentially leaked, a document that they proposed to the DARPA in 2018. We have to make a coronavirus a bioweapon by introducing this purine cleavage site. Now, the point is, even if this has happened in Wuhan, which I think is clear enough by now, and this virus really escaped by accident, let's assume. And just by accident, they had already the vaccination pipeline going for this particular mRNA just by accident. Yeah, good luck. Yep. That I would love to be such a crystal ball in my hands. It would be very nice. But anyway, let's assume this happened all by accident. And then, of course, once you create this mRNA, you have a choice. You have a choice to remove the purine cleavage site. This choice you have, it's just actually a change of one letter in the alphabet of the DNA of the mRNA, and you can remove it. But they didn't do it. So here, purpose comes in. Here you can't deny that you actually did this on purpose. And if you on purpose introduce this cleavage site, you have to know, and I'm pretty sure they knew, the S1 subunit that is then created can actually go into the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier by itself. So even if the mRNA is not reaching the brain by packaging the mRNA in the lipid nanoparticles, if it just maybe is produced, let's say in your right hand or in your liver or wherever it reaches an organ, then of course the purine cleavage site will take care of the spike protein and release the S1 subunit. And this one is very stable and can actually go into the brain. And here, that's why I like the term spikopathy better than actually URUS, to be honest, because here it's not only about endothelial damage. The spike protein attaches usually endothelia on the ACE2 receptor, but it also has a receptor on the immune cells in the brain. And here it's not ACE2, it's TLR4. And TLR4 is essentially a receptor for pathogens. And it immediately reacts to it. It essentially sees the spike protein and believes now that the brain has been infected by coronavirus and reacts to it. And it releases pro-inflammatory cytokines. So it's a different different reaction that we see only on the endothelia. And this reaction causes the production of interleukin-1, for example. Interleukin-1 is known to be one of the most potent inhibitors of cell growth in the hippocampus, in the production of neurons, which are required to keep our mental immune system intact.
Interesting. Yeah, we've been working with a long COVID group throughout the pandemic, and they've been measuring these various circulating immune modulators, and VEGF also goes up in these people that have all this inflammation post-COVID, post-vax. I need to take a little break here. I'm feeling like I should leave people with something positive, perhaps, is there other things they could be doing other than the things we've said already, which is sleeping right, eating right, losing weight, socializing, exercising, those good things?
I think the main thing they have to do is find a purpose in life. I think that's where everything starts. You have to have a purpose in life. And I think the biggest purpose in life that everybody should have, actually, particularly the people that are watching us right now, from where I just know now by deduction that these people, everybody who's watching us right now, have a good hippocampus, that their neurons are growing, and they shouldn't be too much concerned, because otherwise they wouldn't be sitting here and watching us, because they are curious, they are willing to think, and they're willing to do something. And I think it's a time that we all start to do something, that we actually use our ability to think, that our mental immune system allows us to have, to actually use it and help to stop this war against our brain by, first of all, saving ourselves, and then, of course, saving all the others.
Put the mask on yourself before you try to save somebody else. We'll talk a little bit after break about some of the more indoctrinating sort of phenomenon circulating about there. And Caleb, before we go to break, isn't it interesting how often leading a good life, having purpose, is coming into the conversations these days we are having?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Weird.
Sorry,
right?
I was responding on chats, and so I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, it's
okay.
True.
Well, he made the point again that finding purpose in life is a really important part of mitigating the effects of all these things we were talking about. Susan, you were leaning into your mic too. What do you
think? Yeah, for sure.
But I'll say the same thing I said recently that Caleb jumped on, which was, in this country, we get a little confused about purpose and good lives, and understand that leading a good life is fulfilling. It may not always be happy. And I'll just point out, Jesus led a good life, wasn't always happy. And if he had prioritized happy as the only purpose for himself, things would have turned out quite a bit different. So it's leading a good life, which we all need to think about. And the present moment, I agree with Dr. Nehls, the present moment calls for all of us to be thinking about that and to stand up and do things where we are called upon. Take a little break. The book, let's put the book up again, The Indoctrinated Brain. Let's put up the full screen if you don't mind. There we are. Get it now. Read all this. Argue with your friends about it. Warn them. And I'll be back with Dr. Michael Nehls after this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make a resolution that's easy to keep and delivers immediately on its promise. With Genucell Skincare, you can turn back the clock and look 5, 10, even 15 years younger. And right now, Genucell Skincare is celebrating 2024 with its New Year's sales event. Save over 60% off all of our favorite Genucell products with one of our customized skincare routine packages. Say goodbye to those fine lines in the forehead and around your corner of your eyes, sagging jawline, dark marks, skin redness, even under eye bags. Leave them in 2023. Genucel works for women and men. It's safe for all skin types and perfect for skin of any age. Plus, with its immediate effects, Genucel promises results that will make you smile. Guaranteed, or 100% of your money back. Start your new year look off right with one of our custom Genucel skincare bundles right now at Genucel.com/Drew. Use our special code Drew at checkout for extra savings off your order today. And remember, every order placed is automatically upgraded to free shipping. Don't wait. That is Genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. Well, most of my career I've been urging people to kick habits, change habits. Well, this time I'd like to suggest getting into the habit of adding Paleo Valley grass-fed bone broth protein to your daily nutrition regimen. Here's CEO Autumn Smith.
It's made from cows with 100% grass-fed and finished, and bones. They're bones rather than the hide. Most bone broth or collagen powders are made from hides or hooves, but ours is actually made from the bone because it'll contain additional nutrients. Bone broth is a way to bring back those nutrients, those minerals, and there's glucosaminoglycans, and then there's collagen, which helps us prevent wrinkles and joint pain and actually heals our gut. There's gelatin, and there's just all of these ingredients that the modern diet has kind of left by the wayside.
Susan and I have been mixing the chocolate-flavored bone broth literally into our coffee every morning for months, and we've noticed a difference in our energy, appearance of our hair, skin, nails. Susan's particularly very happy with this. The bioavailable protein also helps us feel satiated. That's the part I'm happy with. Paleo Valley bone broth also comes in vanilla and pure, unflavored, and can easily be added to your coffee, smoothies, yogurt. Go to drdrew.com/paleo, P-A-L-E-O, for 15% off your first order. Again, that is drdrew.com/paleo. We all know the value of a good night's sleep. We feel better, look better, have more energy to spare, but you could be missing out on all of those benefits if you're sleeping on sheets that are too hot or too cold or just plain uncomfortable. I have the solution. Cozy Earth bedding. Cozy Earth is the softest and most comfortable sheets, blankets, loungewear, and more. They use premium viscose from highly sustainable bamboo, and we sleep in them regularly. I wear their t-shirts. Susan wears their pajamas. Cozy Earth bedding comes with a 100-night sleep trial, which means you have up to 100 nights to sleep on them, wash them, try them out. If you're not in love, just return them within 100 days for a full refund. Susan and I love them. In fact, we have Cozy Earth sheets on our bed right now, and they made a huge difference in our sleep. If you've never tried Cozy Earth, we have some awesome news. You can save up to 35% off Cozy Earth right now. But hurry, this offer will not last. Go to CozyEarth.com, enter my promo code DREW at checkout for up to 35% off on your first order. That is CozyEarth.com, promo code DREW, COZYEARTH, CozyEarth.com, code DREW. It's funny, I saved my Cozy Earth t-shirt today. I was going to wear it. I thought, I'm going to save it for another, I don't know why. And I am drinking bone broth in my salty cracker copy right now. A quick thing about vaccine. Paul Alexander, because tomorrow or Thursday he's going to come back in. Can you guys help me with that? I can find it on the calendar real quick. But we're going to clarify
Thursday
his vaccine policy, Thursday, and my vaccine position. You know, how you could have nuanced and differing opinions about these things and still be very, very concerned about the kinds of things that Dr. Nehls is talking about today with us. Again, for my practice of medicine, I am called upon to use my judgment to make a risk-reward analysis for every given patient in front of me. Oftentimes, I am taking great risk, oftentimes, in order to achieve a certain reward that makes that risk worth it. So please don't think because I use a product, I think it is totally safe. I think the risk reward calls for it and only in certain populations and only in certain patients. That's how medicine is practiced. This mandating all of anything is frankly disgusting. My guest is Dr. Michael Nehls. He's a physician. He's a geneticist. I'm sure you agree with me on this complete evisceration of the practice of medicine by these centralized authorities. Did you ever imagine at this point in your career or my career we'd be having this conversation?
No, I was stunned when I saw that. I mean, we put First of all, we knew that if anybody dies from COVID, it was in the oldest age group, first of all. Then we knew already that, and it was published very early, that nobody would die from COVID, even in the older age groups, if they have a sufficiently working immune system. So first of all, what you have to do is bring the immune system in a situation where it can deal with the virus and not create a situation where the immune system actually kills the patient by creating this cytokine storm. And for example, the German Cancer Research Center, based on observational and other studies, showed already in November 2020 that before the vaccination program started, that 9 of 10 COVID patients could have been saved. The life could have been saved by just increasing the vitamin D level. And papers later on showed really that this vitamin D, lack of vitamin D, is the cause. It really is the cause of the cytokine storm. So even if you are already sick with COVID, sick enough that you have to go to the hospital, you can't stay at home anymore, and you raise immediately the vitamin D level, which is actually the vitamin prohormone level, because it's not vitamin D that you actually eat, it's the prohormone, that is the vitamin transformed by hydroxylation in the liver. In this form, if this one is raised quickly by giving the people prohormone vitamin D, then nobody dies. Nobody dies, even if he's already so bad infected that he had to go to the hospital. And these studies were out. So we knew before the vaccination program started that it wasn't necessary. Nobody dies of COVID if they are treated well.
So let's talk about, if you don't mind, the indoctrination part of this. So once we're softened up neurobiologically and immunologically, what are some of the indoctrination, I guess we would call them phenomena, that are flying around that concern you?
Yeah, everything is concerning me. The fear-mongering by itself is already detrimental to the hippocampus. You talked early on when we started the conversation about children who experience something bad and have this post-traumatic stress syndrome. There was actually a paper published and sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that something else exists as well. There's something which we call pre-traumatic stress syndrome. That means the trauma has not happened yet. We just imagine it. And that's sufficient to have the hippocampus shrinking. So if
I could interrupt you, Michael, you mean something like saying shelter in place, and if you go out and play with your peers, you're going to kill your parents? You mean something like that? You mean that something might be enough? Of course you're going to see depression in kids like that. It's intuitively obvious. The mechanism you're providing us, not surprising, but please continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's peer-reviewed publications out there which show that just telling people that something bad will happen has already the same effects as if it had happened to them in reality. And so, and I was really wondering why the Gates Foundation actually sponsored this kind of research and published it. But it's clear for me now that they were studying the effects of fear-mongering. The effect on the hippocampus. So that's already bad. And then, of course, we have all these...
That is already bad.
It's already bad.
Keep going, please. Yes.
And then, of course, what happens now when the hippocampus is not able to produce new cells based on the fact that we are isolated, all the measures that have taken place 2020, the fear-mongering that continues in all areas, being it climate change, being it world war, maybe by fights over certain borders, which are currently ongoing on several places on the earth. And of course, the World Economic Forum, which talks about perma-pandemics. And so what is happening there? If you don't produce new cells in the hippocampus, which I call index neurons, because they memorize where and when we essentially had a thought, where and when in our lives we had an experience that we wanted to remember. And these neurons are required to recall this memory. And if these cells are not produced, then of course we cannot memorize new things unless you actually override pre-existing memories. And now if the spike, for example, the neuroinflammation causes the hippocampus to stop producing new index neurons, and you at the same time, you have this fear mongering and the narratives pounding on your head, essentially, and force you to memorize all these things, despite the fact that you actually have no memory capacity, then you override previous experiences. That it means you diminish the amount of personal experiences, and your individuality essentially shrinks. You lose your personality, your individuality, and it is essentially overridden and by the narratives. And what you get out of this, you can imagine. You have people that have a reduced personality, a reduced individuality, and when they think about themselves, they only think about the narratives as being part of them. And I have encountered this even personally. I have family members who really believed everything that they were told, and there was no possibility for me to discuss anything with them, because the narrative had become already part of their personality. And so it's not a neutral discussion about any topics, about the science behind it or anything else. It is the very moment these narratives become part of their personality, everything changes. It's impossible, because when you discuss the narrative, then you essentially put their personality into question. And of course, that's what the people don't like.
Interesting. It's the tribalism, the attack on the self, all these sorts of mechanisms. Do you have any specific recommendations in terms of resisting, other than the healthy brain piece of this? Are there things for people to be aware of, to recognize when they're being manipulated? I just feel like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I guess that's why I'm asking you the question very directly, which is that I never, I was trained like you as a scientist, so persuasion was not something on my mind. And when I thought about getting patients to comply with recommendations, it was really about just being clear, not being persuasive. But persuasion has suddenly become this incredibly powerful phenomenology that's afoot. And I'm blanking on the names of the name of the Yale professor that had the, oh gosh darn it, the very famous experiment where he got people to electrocute. He essentially got people to believe that they were electrocuting subjects because a authority figure told them to. Remember?
Don't look at me.
Was it Milgram?
Milgram experiment. Thank you very much.
He's looking at me.
The Milgram experiment. Yeah. And I thought about that as sort of a weird anachronism, and we had outgrown all that, and we weren't subject to that anymore because we understood propaganda. Oh my God, was I wrong? It's never been more powerful. It's never been more pervasive. There's never been more hysteria. What do we do to protect ourselves?
Well, first of all, not everybody was assaulted by this. We call this, there was a Nobel Prize in 2002 given to Daniel Kahneman in economics, actually, but he's a psychiatrist. And the story. I mean, he essentially discovered with others that we have two thinking systems. He called one system one, which is the fast-acting system. I actually think it's not a thinking system. It's just reaction. It's unconscious. And it's a misnomer, in my opinion, maybe good for the book he published, which says idle, thinking fast, thinking slow. But the thinking fast is not really thinking. The thinking slow is thinking, but it requires energy. The energy actually resides in these new cells that are produced. And so and we need this energy to think and to memorize our thoughts. So about 25% of the people on our globe didn't essentially accept what they were told. And this reminds me of an experiment that was done in the mid of the 20th century by Solomon Nash. he essentially tested people if they rather follow the mass or follow their common sense. And it was clear that there is a certain percentage, and it was actually the same percentage that refused the injection now. And I was wondering even if this is genetic or something else. But there are at least 20 to 25% which didn't accept what was going on. They were skeptical, and they realized there's something really going on wrong. And this is a large percentage. Now, when Solomon Nash did this experiment, he changed the setting of the experiment, and the group that actually said something wrong, and the one person which was tested and was asked to follow the wrong speaking mass or its own common sense. When the mass became smaller, just by one person, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 11, then the likelihood that this one person being tested follows his common sense increased dramatically. So it's very important, in my opinion, that the 24% that understand that there's something wrong going on, and many of them are watching us, hopefully, that these people have to stand up and tell the others we are also a greater mass. You are not alone. And so you can trust maybe us more than the others. You can trust your common sense. And I'm seeing that already in Germany, and it gives me a lot of hope. So we see already that the 3rd, 4th, or 5th injection is refused more and more. And there's a new maturity coming along. Officially, of course, nobody talks about this maturity, but I think we have a maturity meanwhile already of people who understand that something is going astray, that we have to refuse it. And we see it here in Germany very well at the moment. And that's probably one of the reasons my book is now a bestseller for 5 months already in Germany, which I didn't expect when I wrote it, because at that time I thought I'm pretty much on my own. But this tells me that something is changing, and that the Nash experiment is essentially telling us that more people are waking up because they are aware that there's a group of people like us who tell them the truth, because they see the side effects of the vaccine, they see how people are suffering, and they see all the other things that are going on, and we have to keep up and tell them. And I think that's I think is the most important part. This is what I was talking about previously when we discussed that this is the purpose in life. It's not about happiness. It's not making me happy telling people what is going on, but it is a very important purpose in life, because it helps me to preserve, hopefully, the world in a way that it makes sense for my kids and my grandchildren to live and have the chance to pursue happiness. And I think that's important.
And the Nash experiment, if I remember, it was just a line. The group said this line was longer, and it was clearly not longer. Was it that experiment?
Yeah, there were 3 lines, A, B, and C, and they had to propel it to a 4th line, let's say D. And D was exactly the length of B, but the group was instructed to say A is the correct answer. A is identical to D, even if it wasn't. And the 12th person was the actual person that was tested. And he heard the answers of the other 11 and said, well, it looks like B, but they all tell me it's A. So I have to make a decision now. Do I follow the group and say wrongly it's A, or do I follow my own common sense and say, okay, it's B? That's better what the group is saying.
And the line was obviously the same too. The other two were obviously not matching up.
Obviously the same. Yeah. But if one of the 11 was also allowed to say B, then of course this one person that was tested was not alone anymore, and the likelihood increased from 20% to 40%. And this is where I see a lot of hope at the moment.
Yes, you're giving me hope. Actually, even just having that, just shouting that out, frankly. Are you aware of what was going on in France during some of the mandates? I was in Paris a couple of years ago, when the mandates were peaking and the youth were out in the streets demonstrating against mandates. They were saying, look, you've told us this illness is not going to harm us. Now you're going to force us to put something in our bodies. This is not the founding principle of a republic built on liberty. This is the opposite of that. And I really admired that. And I'm let you vamp about this for a second. A, are you aware of that? B, is it there's other countries where that kind of thing is going on? And C, is it maybe the French are sort of sensitive to that kind of thing because of their history? I mean, they've had lots of mob misadventures, and so maybe they're less likely to go on with the mob because of their history.
Well, it's hard to tell because the vaccination rates in France were at the end at least as high as in Germany. And in Germany, they were about 75 to 80%. So the national experiment essentially, I think, was pretty much the same everywhere. If there were demonstrations, we had demonstrations in Germany too. But of course, not as many people went out as they should have. So I think the numbers of people refusing the vaccination were pretty much the same. But in Germany, they were not allowed. This is one of the reasons why I really push now that we are going on the streets, that we are fighting against that. And we see people now doing that. For example, there is now new laws in Germany regarding the fuel for the agricultural industry, that it will become more expensive, cutting down essentially the ability of many farmers to produce the goods for life. And what I see now very strongly is that people go on the street, people which are not farmers, but they support the farmers. And I think this kind of change in the ability or in the willingness to fight is probably coming along at the right moment. And maybe what people experienced in the last 4 years made them aware that it's really time to stand up.
Yeah, I think you could be right. Let me ask a follow-on question to the have a meaningful life recommendation you've made. Do you feel like some sort of spiritual component is important to that? Have we lost track of that? I mean, humans seem to need something in that zone, and things not so good fill in if they don't have that, but I'll let you speak to it.
Well, I'm not an expert in these areas, but I would support your notion here. We need to have more spirituality. From my personal perspective, spirituality is meaning being more together, one with nature. Nature is very important. We are part of nature, and we lost this connection. We lost this connection in medicine very heavily. So if people, for example, have a deficiency in vitamin D, and they develop essentially a depression out of this, then they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, depression, I have a prescription here for you. But practically speaking, the lack of vitamin D is the problem. And vitamin D is necessary. It's part of our nature. We are not outside of nature. And I think this is something that is really weird. We believe that humans dominate nature and are not really part of nature. But we are natural beings, and we have natural necessities which come out of which are defined by our evolution. And if we ignore these necessities, we get sick. We might not get sick immediately, as my wife usually tells. It doesn't kill you immediately, but it doesn't mean that it has not long-term effects. And if the long-term effect, for example, is that we get Alzheimer's, then the short-term effect is that we are not as efficient in our thinking, even if we are young, and we make the wrong decisions. And one of the wrong decisions is really that we don't think we are part of nature anymore, and that we don't have natural needs. And I think this is the biggest problem. And being more close to nature, seeing the spirituality in nature, maybe brings us closer to nature and accept that we have to nourish our mind, our body with the good stuff. And then, of course, our hippocampus will be very happy. It will grow. And if the hippocampus is happy, we all will be happy. We will be more creative. We will be more curious. We will be more outgoing. We will be more social. And we realize that everything that we do locally will have effects all over the world.
Isn't it interesting that sunlight is what gives us our 1,25-dihydroxy active vitamin D molecule, and that's out in the world. And the way I think about it is we've lost track of our embeddedness. It's like we've disintegrated so many things. We've thought only about the brain, but of course the brain is historically, certainly in the 1990s, we were just busy with the brain. Well, the brain is embedded in a body, in an autonomic and a peripheral nervous system. And the body's embedded in a environment and a family and a community. And that is embedded in a historical context, in a larger social context. And it's all embedded in the world, quite literally, which is the natural world. And so we've sort of compartmentalized all these things. And I think every step of the way, it's to our detriment.
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. I can only underwrite or subscribe what you're saying. We have to go back to nature. We have to accept we are part of nature with all facets. Yeah, family life. I mean, we lost the contact to our families. For example, we are aging. We could age up to the age of 120. The oldest woman was alive ever was 122 years old. It is known that every girl that is born right now has the possibility, 50% chance to reach the age of 100 years. What my research shows that even at the age of 100, we can still be curious, we can still learn, and the hippocampus can still grow, meaning we don't get Alzheimer's, but we become more wise. And this is the ability that we have because we have a purpose in life. And and the purpose in life of old people essentially is to give their wisdom to the children and to the grandchildren. And this is completely lost in our modern society. We believe Google, but we don't believe our grandparents. The life experience that they have is so important. And if we're not interested in their life experience, then their purpose in life is essentially lost. And that is one of the causes of Alzheimer's and depression. So it's a vicious cycle, and we have to change that. We have to go back to family, and we have to believe that family is important. We have to understand that because it is natural to be in a family and not just on our own all the time. And divide and conquer, I guess, is what we are experiencing right now. We are conquered because we are divided.
If you look at history, it's every time ideology takes over. Ideology is not natural. It's some abstraction that humans come to and decide that's the new natural, and it never turns out well for human beings. I want to go back quickly to some biology for a second. A lot has been made, and you made the case today about the lipid nanoparticles and the mRNA itself, and of course there's concerns about DNA contamination. But I have to say, I've been using the RSV vaccine for patients, and I have not seen a single side effect. Of course, it's in patients that are at high risk and for whom RSV could be devastating, and I'm willing to take that risk. But I really, it makes me, that clinical experience makes me think, man, that spike protein is so much the problem, because I've seen lots of vaccine reactions, lots. And nothing like that from the RSV. Of course, I'm not vaccinating young people, nor would I, by the way. I don't vaccinate young people. I don't recommend that. But I've seen other people who have vaccinated young people, and I see what happens to them. It's not great. Any thoughts about that? Or am I just eventually going to see stuff from that platform? Or is it really, is that clinical experience telling me that the big enemy is the spike protein?
From my point of view, the biggest enemy is the spike protein. The spike is really toxic. It's neurotoxic. It's toxic for the endothelia. It's toxic for the whole body. And the body usually wants to get rid of it very quickly. And it usually does if it's not a modified version. So we have to do something about this. I actually support, and you find it on my website, I just wrote a large article about one possibility to stop and the neuroinflammatory process activated by the spike protein, and that is by giving people low-dose lithium. I actually suggest lithium orotate because we know the spike protein essentially is recognized by the TLR4 the receptor which I mentioned in the microglia and the immune cells of the brain, if they essentially recognize this receptor, a cascade essentially is started, an information cascade up to the nucleus of the cell, which then is activating all these genes for the pro-inflammatory cytokines. And the transducer of this signal is called GSK3 beta. The name doesn't mean anything at the moment. I can mention it, but it doesn't matter. So GSK3 beta is an important transducer of the signal that is essentially activated by the recognition of the spike protein. And the natural inhibitor of GSK3 beta is lithium. So lithium, and from the natural history of humans, we know that their brains, or our brains, essentially develop in a time frame when we were not actually hunters and gatherers, but rather fishermen and gatherers. And I actually published a book about this. It's called The Algae Oil Revolution, because I recommend algae oil as a source of omega-3 fatty acids, which are needed for the brain and actually needed for the hippocampus, specifically at high doses. So anyway, in this time, we were essentially forced by a drought caused by an ice age, which was lasting over 70,000 years, that we had to live at the ocean. And the fish from the ocean has 100 times higher concentration of lithium than fish from freshwater, because freshwater has a low amount of lithium in it. So anyway, this way we were used to get 1 to 2 milligrams of lithium a day. Lithium at this dose is an essential trace element, according to the World Health Organization, for rats and goats. And I know, for example, fruit flies live 30% longer if they get a little amount of lithium. So it's essential for every animal that we know of, except for humans, ridiculously. But we know it would buffer the effect of the spike protein. In addition, it was shown that lithium at a low dose also activates neurogenesis of the hippocampus, and it activates what we call autophagia, meaning the removal of microorganelles which are not functioning, or proteins that are dysfunctional. And it was a paper published just recently, and you find it on my website, that proposes that lithium can be used to remove the spike protein, low-dose lithium. And we know that TLR4 is responsible for the brain fog, the activation of the TLR4 by the spike protein. And the University of Buffalo recently published a press release, and they're now conducting a larger study where they show that lithium low dose removes the brain fog quite efficiently. The doctor tested it on 10
interesting.
Patients, and 9 of 10 patients immediately had essentially the brain fog removed after long COVID. And I'm pretty sure, since long COVID is a spikopathy, the same will happen in patients that have the post-vax syndrome. So that's at least what I would try, low-dose lithium, ideally lithium orotate, because orotate is an active transporter in our brain, over the blood-brain area, which essentially allows us to use low amounts of lithium, because a lot of it is transported in the brain, where it actually activates or inhibits the neuroinflammatory deathly cycle.
And then not worry about the thyroid and kidney issues with lithium then.
No, it's not a low dose.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's funny. I actually took fluvoxamine, which is a similar idea, which is activating the sigma-1 receptor anti-inflammatory system. And it helped clear my COVID fog after a bad case of COVID. And after the first dose, within 30 minutes, the ringing in my ears went away, which was odd. And then the fog improved considerably, as did stamina. So again, the inflammatory system in the brain is a key target for the post-vax and the post-COVID. And probably, you know, if we're smart, acute COVID as well, which is kind of odd that we let the acute COVID have its way with us. You know what I mean? Like, if we want to worry about how the COVID itself is affecting the brain, it's during the acute COVID, I think we have most trouble.
Actually, this is already published, what you're saying. I actually proposed in 2021, I wrote a book. It's called The Corona Syndrome. It was only published in German so far, German language. But there I proposed lithium as an antidote against acute COVID already. And it's already known in my paper, Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease, which you might want to put up. Here I show in my paper that low-dose lithium is actually effective in essentially stopping the progression of Alzheimer's because it stops neuroinflammation and it activates the neurogenesis as the main reason why you actually are able to stop the Alzheimer's process. But
now, is that something where you get a supplement over the counter, or you have to get prescribed the lithium?
It's not accepted as an essential trace element, which has some problems with it, because it is essential. I make the case actually in my paper that is on my website. But since it's not accepted, interestingly, in America you get it over the counter. In Germany, you actually need a prescription by a physician. And you need a pharmaceutical, you need essentially what is called, where you get the drugs. Where do you get the
prescription?
The prescription, where you go to somebody, a pharmacy, you go to the, and you have to get
are you recommending people go out and get lithium now if they have any concerns?
Absolutely. I take it myself. I take lithium.
What do you take? What exactly do you take? Like, what's the dose? What's the form?
I take about 1 milligram. The essential dose, and you will find it in my paper, the essential dose of lithium is 1 milligram, the effective dose of lithium. As a lithium orotate.
Lithium
orotate.
Say it again, lithium or orotate.
Orotate, okay. Yeah. And orotate is also important. It's something that the brain needs to produce nucleotides, which is essential for the production of new cells in the brain. So neurogenesis actually requires also orotate. So the combination of both is actually ideal. And of course, the 1 milligram refers to the lithium in the orotate. You need like 25 milligrams of the complex because the orotate is heavier than the lithium. That is for me, is the essential dose. And I take a 5-time higher dose. I recommend at the moment to get rid of the brain fog. But once you get rid of it, you can reduce it again to the essential dose. And the essential dose is what I take every day since years.
We have a lot of vaccine-injured people that stop by and listen to this stuff, so maybe there's something they could try. Certainly talk to your doctor about that if there's any question. Doctor, what's that, Susan? You yelled out without having your mic on.
Get the book.
Get his. Is it in the book? Is it? Well, it's on the website.
That's not what he said, right?
It's in the website, but do get the book too, so you can. The website is Michael-Nehls, Nehls. Follow him on Twitter as well, X, Nehls MD. The book is The Indoctrinated Brain: How to Successfully Fend Off the Global Attack on Your Mental Freedom. Put it up there, Caleb. Let's get one more look at it before we kind of wrap things up here. It's a whole interesting new avenue for us to pay attention to. Dr. Nehls attempts to answer a lot of questions that are flying around out there. Is there anything we have left out, Michael, before we wrap this up?
I think we have left out a lot of things that people can now find in the book. Fortunately.
Perfect.
But I think what this book really is you are a physician, I'm a physician, and we both know that therapy can only work. Sometimes it works accidentally, maybe, but it really only works if we have the right diagnosis. And I'm pretty sure this book gives us the right diagnosis of what was happening and what is going to happen, most likely. And so I truly believe that it also offers the right therapy and to heal our society. And I'm pretty sure if we really take up the task, we will be better off than even before COVID ever happened.
Oh, yeah, it has certainly exposed a lot of things to us that were underway, and I feel like pre-COVID, we're naive to a lot of things that we are not so much naive to anymore. Regardless who you are out there listening to this conversation and what your opinions are, I guarantee you, whatever your opinion is, whatever you've concluded, you still have a different feeling about how you were before COVID as opposed to now. Dr. Michael Nehls, I really appreciate you spending time with us. I know you're in a different time zone and whatnot, so I'm going to let you go. And is other than the Nehls MD on X and your website and the book, is there any place else you'd like people to find you?
I have a Substack too, but you will find it over my website, so it would not be a problem.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Stay in touch.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And there we go. Interesting stuff, right? Another new, interesting. I'm thinking about that lithium orotate.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Especially with the Alzheimer's connection. Like, I actually pulled up how he had his paper ready to show on screen because I was reading it while he was talking. And so when he mentioned, I just popped it right up. He actually wrote that. It was published back in 2016. So that whole research paper has been out for a long time about connecting lithium use for helping Alzheimer's disease.
And look, these are scientific theories.
Can I get some of that?
Yeah, I'll get you some. You scared me a couple times lately where I think I might want to give you that. But these are scientific theories. These are not fact, right? These are attempts to understand and create a construction of what's going on here and possible ways of helping people. That's all. And it may end up being true. Or it may not. But these are all things to think, ruminate about, think on, decide, are you going to read the book? It doesn't seem like a book you ought to read. And the fact that it's a bestseller in Germany is really an interesting little footnote there. So tomorrow, yes.
Oh, if you could give like a quick, so every time I've heard of any, like if I had a friend that was on lithium, it was almost because of some sort of a severe, like a mental health sort of a thing. So I've never heard of lithium being used in this way.
No,
is it different dosages or what is, how is what he's talking about different than like extreme?
Yeah, he's talking about lithium orotate. Usually it's lithium carbonate that is used for bipolar disorder, for manic depression. It was the first drug sort of used for that. It was very effective. There are better drugs now, so it's not used that often. In the doses that we use it for bipolar disorder, you have to get blood tests to make sure it's in the therapeutic range and not too low or too high. It can affect the kidney in various ways that are not so great, and it can affect the thyroid in various ways that are not so great. None of them devastating, but things that need to be monitored in case those things develop. Sort of, I believe it's interstitial nephritis in kidney, and the thyroid, it can have protein effects on thyroid function. So there is that. He is not talking about that. He's talking like literally a hundredth less dose of the lithium in a slightly different format that doesn't even get to these other organs. So the other thing it is sometimes used for, or historically has been used for, is to enhance the effect of antidepressant medication, particularly serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So sometimes people will be on something like Zoloft or Prozac and a small amount of lithium, though I've noticed in recent years they've not been doing so much of that. So that is lithium that you've heard about in lore. And does that answer everybody's question? Caleb,
yeah, that answers it. Yeah, that answers it, because I only heard of lithium as in like extreme cases, so I'd never heard of it used in this way. But his paper is very interesting, so I suggest people go look at that.
Yeah,
it's from 2016.
Smart guy, interesting guy. And again, this is how science is done. It moves forwards. It's a wheel that turns very slowly, and some things get cast off, and some get incorporated in and stay in. This thing that thus saith the Lord is science is just anathema to science. So
wouldn't it be wild if like something like lithium actually does help with the brain fog in that way? It's something that's been around for so long that already exists that they don't need to.
How about fluvoxamine? How about Steve Kirsch and his work on fluvoxamine? It helped me a great deal. It's helped a lot of people. Not everybody, but it helps through that anti-inflammatory pathway.
Wild.
And that's the point. That's what we should. That's where hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and fluvoxamine and budesonide came from. You take medicines that are already approved and you would start using them to see if they have an application. People think too much about medication and the pathways they serve to treat. The biology of the body has lots of crossover mechanisms. So oftentimes something that treats, say, something like depression may, look at where Viagra was to treat heart disease. And lo and behold, it does this. These things, crossover functions in other organs and other parts of the body are very common, which is why they started deploying these medications that had a possible mechanism of action for working against COVID. And we're still arguing about that, for God's sakes. But here we are. Speaking of that, Dr. Peter McCullough in here tomorrow, I believe. Is that correct, Caleb? There they are.
Yep, that's correct.
Peter McCullough, that is our lineup going forward. Dr. Latipo, Jim Brewer, a lot of interesting people coming in. And at the end of Royce White on Thursday, Dr. Paul Alexander will come back around, and we're going to put to rest all this vaccine nonsense. It's just, and of course, whatever you read on Twitter, whenever people write on their Substacks, it's never what you say, because they never contact the people they're writing about and ask them what their opinion is. They always tell you something that they think the person said, which is never what you said. And just everything that goes viral, everything that's controversial is almost always that way. Susan, you're looking very serious.
And everybody has a point of view out there these days. You know what I mean? Like, they know everything. And everything about you, everything about me.
Isn't that nice? Everything about
I
you.
got 3 vaccines because I wanted to travel out of the country, fly to New York, go to dinner in New York, because I'm an old person. And that's what I like to do. I didn't want to stay home, stuck in my house, wringing my hands and going, oh God, I don't want to get the vaccine. I don't want to travel.
But the horrible thing was you would not have been able to do those things if you hadn't.
No, and I just took
And by the way,
risk.
it was not just this country. We were showing our damn passport around France and Greece and these other places,
but you
too.
took one vaccine and you had a horrible response.
Yes, I
and
did.
I didn't have any response, but I may have lost a tooth. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's right. Oh, there's my.
But it was worth the risk for
Interesting.
me to get to go to France and Greece and New
I
York.
woke up
and
with a
get
black
the fuck
eye.
out of California.
Black eye, which is the presenting feature of the microvascular clotting that was happening from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the transverse sinus. Fortunately, I did not progress. It did not seem to have, at least. Maybe I still have a clot in that sinus. Who knows? But I know.
It's so weird.
And I was sick from it too. I was quite sick.
But I wish that I didn't have to take the vaccine.
It's interesting, though. Steve Kirsch has a survey going around. Do you know somebody who was vaccine injured? And I would have, in your immediate family and friends, and I would have said no. But you know what? I was vaccine injured. I was definitely vaccine injured. It didn't have consequence. But
We got lucky though.
I definitely should have reported that had they not the next day withdrawn the vaccine. So I was the end of the Johnson & Johnson, but was probably in many ways, having lived through that particular reaction, probably better off.
Well, you had
vaccine.
COVID trying to get the vaccine, and
Right.
then you didn't need the vaccine. But
Right.
then in order to fly to Greece, you had to get something.
That's right.
So you went for the lesser of all evils and ended up almost dying.
Yep. There you go.
Yep.
So, Peter McCullough in here tomorrow. We'll continue this conversation. We appreciate you all. We were watching you on the Restream. I know Susan was in there on the Rumble Rants. Please do sign up on the Rumble channel. We'd love to see you over there.
We're going to get Doug Stanhope in here.
Oh, were you? I saw some stuff going back.
That was Jeff's idea.
Doug would be great.
Josh.
Time to get Doug back.
I just texted him. We're having a long dialogue about Austin in the 90s.
and get maybe speaking of Rumble, maybe David Rubin. Maybe it's time to him to get back around in here too. Susan, listening?
Hell yeah,
absolutely.
Get some lithium for that.
I'm
going to get some lithium orotate for young Susan here. All right, everybody.
I was doing something else. Sorry.
I'm aware of that.
Lithium for everyone.
But you were in the middle of a streaming show, and I was speaking right to you. But okay, what do you?
I'm done.
I'm just saying.
I'm gonna go make dinner.
I'm gonna enhance your hippocampal volume. All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow at 3:00 Pacific time.
I need to go skiing.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.